Today, I'm going to share 11 tips to create a zero-waste garden while staying within budget. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us out a lot and we really appreciate it. So to start, I want to explain real quick what a zero-waste garden is. Zero-waste gardens are as self-sustaining as possible. So instead of working against nature, you use its advantages to help you create a garden using what is already there. This process makes for an environmentally friendly and productive garden. Now let's get into the tips. The first tip is to do your research. Yes, I know. For some people, research is super fun. I love doing research about everything. What animals we're keeping, what we should grow in the garden, when we should plant it. I love doing research. But for some people, this isn't as fun. But it is important if you want to have a zero-waste garden. You don't want to plant what's not good for your area. Knowing what grows well in your area is very important. And I'm going to leave a link to the USDA's plant hardiness zone because knowing your gardening zone is really going to help you out in the long run. Tip number 2, try companion planting. If you've never heard of this before, companion planting is putting two plants together that do something for each other, or one does something for the other. And in return, they either help each other out. Sometimes this is to deter pests. Sometimes it's to add nutrients to your soil for another plant. But for us, an example would be that we planted tomatoes and lettuce together this year. The reason for doing that is that tomatoes companion plant with lettuce to provide the lettuce shade. And in our hot zone, this is very helpful for our lettuce and is probably going to prolong its life in our garden. If you guys want a good way to tell what is a companion plant, I'm going to leave a link to an app down below that I use. Now, I just use the free version of this app to tell me what grows well together, and it also tells you what you should not plant together. So plants that will attract pests to one another, plants that will deplete the nutrients of each other. There's also a paid for version of this app that allows you to actually plan out your gardens within the app, but I don't use this. The third tip is to start your own seeds. Yes, I know. Going to the nurseries and buying your beautiful, healthy plants all ready to go in the garden is really nice and easy. But starting your own seeds is a better solution. It's also good to get creative with your seed starting pots. Use things that are compostable, even just old household items. Like you can use old metal cans to start seeds by just drilling a couple holes in the bottom. Now, we still use the plastic trays and containers, and that's because when we volunteer at Texas Master Gardens, they bring lots and lots of trays. They can bring hundreds sometimes to these gardens to put new flowers into gardens, and instead of just letting them throw them away, we bring them home. So we still continue to use the plastic pots and trays to make sure that they get a second life. But because most people don't have access to this, I recommend you just get creative with what you got. You can also propagate your own trees and bushes by taking cuttings. And if you don't have trees, you may have a neighbor or a friend that is willing to let you take a cutting. And if you want to know how you can clone a fruit tree for free by air layering, I'll leave a link to a video down below. It's also good to mention plants like strawberries will put out runners and reproduce themselves. So you only need to buy yourself a couple plants to get started. Potatoes and ginger, all you need to do is buy organic potatoes and ginger. You don't need to buy special seed potatoes or anything like that. We bought our potatoes in these potato towers behind me that you can see are beautifully green and growing from Azure Standard. And the ones that we bought come in brown paper bags and the breathable plastic bags that sprout very quickly. So we just left them in there and they sprout within a couple weeks. And as you can see, they're absolutely beautiful. If you've never shopped from Azure Standard before but would like to, I'll leave our referral link down below. Tip number 4, if you are unsure if a plant is going to grow well in a certain spot in your garden, you can leave it in a pot and just move it around your garden to figure out which spots are best for it. Yes, potted plants do require more water, but it's better than having to take care of a plant in a bad spot. But if you're sure something will grow good there, put it in the ground. I also just want to take a quick second to mention here that we only water our plants once or twice after planting, and that's all we do for the entire season. So if you want to know how we do that and why we do that for healthier plants, leave a comment down below and I'll consider making a video. Tip number 5, keep a garden journal. Yes, this is something we struggle with. We do not keep good records of our plants at all. When we plant them, how we grow them. Now, we are doing better this year, but keeping a garden journal is important because then you know when to plant something so that it will succeed. You'll know that if you planted something somewhere and it failed, you'll know to try somewhere else next year. You will forget these things. You think that you will remember, but you won't. Tip number 6, collect seeds from your plants. So before the season is up, make sure that you've collected seeds from all of the plants you want to grow again next year. Now, I just want to mention here that fruit trees and bushes usually you won't be able to produce a true clone off of the seeds. That's why it's better to probably take cuttings off of your trees and bushes. Another thing I'd like to mention is that if you buy hybrid varieties of, let's say, a tomato or a pepper or any plant, the seeds from that plant will not breed true. You will not get the same plant. It's going to revert to the original, which is usually not as good. And that's why we take cuttings from our trees and bushes and only grow heirloom varieties. So we make sure that we're buying only heirloom seeds of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, whatever we want to take seeds from, we only grow heirloom. Tip number 7, stop cleaning your garden. Yes, you heard me right. Stop making your garden look like those pretty ones that you see on the magazines. That is not what you want your garden to look like if you want zero waste. I actually even pick weeds out from our garden, and as long as it's not an invasive species that will keep growing if I leave it there, I just throw it right back in the garden. And the reason for this is that those weeds and their roots contain nutrients that they've pulled up from the soil. And by leaving them there, they will decompose and then feed your plants that you want to grow. You can also leave your dead plant matter from your annuals and your perennials that have died back, and you can just leave it there. Let it decompose. You can even chop it up if you want it to decompose a little bit faster. Leave it on the soil. Let it decompose and let it feed your plants. Tip number 8, don't dig up your garden anymore. Stop tilling your garden. It's terrible for your soil. You disturb all the good things happening in your soil, which you don't want. Instead, go for a good no-till method. Use cardboard and mulch and compost to keep the weeds down instead of tilling it all up. This way, the weeds will actually die back, like we talked about before, and they will feed your soil instead of ripping up what's already there to help your plant. Tip number 9, when your plants have died, like we talked about, and you're going to go ahead and chop them up and leave them in your soil now, you want to leave the roots of those plants in the ground. Yes, those roots have collected so much nutrients from the soil. You want to give it back to the soil. Let them decompose in the soil and feed the soil for your next year's crops. Tip number 10, have a compost pile. This is probably something you're already doing if you've been looking into zero waste. Having a compost pile is great because you can put all of your kitchen scraps in there, let them decompose, and then use it to feed your garden. We also put in there our chicken bedding and our cow's bedding, which makes for a very rich, nutrient-dense compost. Last but not least, tip number 11, use what nature grows for you. Find some books or people in your area that know what grows in your area that you can already eat. Like dandelions. Most people think that they're a pesky weed, but you know you can use every part of that plant. It's all edible and medicinal. And that is just one example of plants that you can use that are already growing for you. If you guys live in the East Texas area, I'll leave a video down below for you about what plants you can forage for here. And that's all I have to share with you all today. Make sure if you have any questions or any other tips that I missed, make sure to leave them in the comments below. Give this video a big thumbs up. We really appreciate it. And like I said before, make sure you're subscribed.